It's time to retire the willpower message and start understanding the person when it comes to metabolic health. That is today's show. Hello, Lara. How you doing?
Hi, Alex. I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
I am so excited to have you back. I had no idea until very, very recently that you were writing a book on metabolic health. And I want to start right there because over the last few years, I might have interviewed and read several books on the topic.
Mm.
And I would imagine you are always seeing what's coming out in the space as well. And you're at the coalface with your patients. What
Yeah.
made you want to tackle this? And what did you feel like people weren't getting that your book could give them that they hadn't seen yet?
Yeah, it's an excellent. Well, for me, it was about, as I say in the introduction, it was about going deeper into women's health. It still came from the place of my main passions are menstruation and women's hormones and perimenopause, and but this metabolic health is such an integrated part of that. And I could see that as a clinician and as a scientist, and it's like that's the next best step. And I wanted to find a way to communicate that and emphasize the importance of it um, in a compassionate way. I know early on I spoke to a lot of people trying to get help with this book, including a close friend who's a clinical psychologist. And she asked me early on, she said, "What is the main thing, Barley, what is the main thing you're trying to do?" I'm like, well, my first step with the book is to not make things worse. Like, I really just want to make people
Yes.
feel better about the process, not worse. And I know from my patients and just from observing, it's so easy to kind of get set up for, oh, this time it's going to work, this is going to be the thing. And then
Mm,
it not work for whatever reason. And then people feel, of course, because we're women, we like people blame themselves. Like it's not like,
yes.
they're
That's
like, well,
it.
I'm broken. I must, this obviously this one diet has worked for everyone else and it didn't work for me. So that just confirms how broken I am. And so I just really wanted to, well, as I say in the book, try to do things differently, try to
Mm.
not leave anyone behind. Basically, it's like
Oh,
there's a
you didn't
section in
leave
early
anyone behind.
early in the
That's
chapter. It's like
for
you are not
sure.
going to fail at this. Like there's no
Mm.
failing at getting biologically healthier. Like there's always just going forward, even if it's like one step forward, two steps back, because
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
had a beautiful guest
yeah.
recently who said, and it was Juliet Starrett, who, she's part of the Ready State, and they did that beautiful book that was on mobility and balance, really
Mm,
bringing those into the cornerstone of health as we age,
mm,
and how it's never too early or too late to
correct.
start on these things. And she said, success is actually just progress. Any kind of
Right.
progress, any kind of new clarity, it's
Yeah.
success. And
Yeah.
I think we often think because we're not there yet, wherever
Yeah.
this imaginary picture is, we feel unsuccessful and like we're still failing instead
Mhm.
of we're having little successes. I think it's such a
Yeah.
powerful reframe.
Yeah, no, it's good. And a big part of that success is just feeling better. Like
Mm,
trusting that first and foremost. Like I say in
yeah.
the book, it's about having more energy,
Mm,
feeling more satiety, which is an important concept, which is just this ongoing feeling of not just feeling satisfied with meals, but it's bigger than that. It's feeling like, you have enough energy between meals. You feel good. Your cells are getting the energy they need.
they're your friends.
Hmm.
They're on your team.
Yeah.
Okay, so I love that you start the book with you're not failing. It's not, you don't have to be ashamed anymore. I remember being a teenager and realizing, like, I was probably about 14, 15, and realizing I was the slightly big, and I wasn't even big, right? But I was the slightly bigger girl, the one who had the complex around going bikini shopping with friends at the mall. And even though I was a dancer, a tennis player, so active, but just because I was a little bigger and just because the ballet teacher said, keep sticking that butt in and keep singling me out in class, girls often get these messages that I sometimes think actually plays into worsening metabolic health journeys
Oh yeah.
because you're just thinking about it more and you've been othered in some way growing up. And I would never have considered myself as someone having an eating disorder. I was I was still quite healthy, I guess, with my relationship with food. But if I look back, I started tuning into all the protocols that came up on the Oprah show as a teen.
Yeah.
And and I just think, at least in the 90s, we went one by one through the celebrity protocols. I think of young girls now
We're
with
just
this.
bombarded.
Oh my gosh, you go onto social media and you scroll for maybe 2 hours. Let's just say you did that. You could come up against different, this is how we do optimal health or peak training or diets or
I
protocols. And
know.
you got to join me and you got to get off the meat and you got to get on the plants or you got to get on the meat because you're too inflamed. Oh my gosh, Lara, like I think that would be way worse growing up now or being a young woman, impressionable, or a midlifer who feels like they've tried everything and they're jumping from protocol to try and feel just a little better in a day. What do we do with this? It's awful.
No. Well, we do need to collectively just try to, yeah, detach from the, it's
Yeah.
hard. Those decades of it, I think women have always been scrutinized and was looking a
Mm,
certain way, but I think you're right. I think the 90s, the 80s, 90s, uh, and since then have been particularly brutal in terms of certain, yeah, expectations about
mm.
body, not just size, but like particular kind of shape. So I offer various things in the book, including the fact that it's just a fact that we come in different shapes and sizes. And
I
from, I give,
know. I
like,
love
some
that you
women have,
said we don't need to solve big butts.
no,
It's so
don't
good.
break your heart. Don't break your heart trying to lose a big bum when a big bum is actually healthy.
Mm.
This is the sad part of it all. But for you, Alex, like what helped, I guess, with the wisdom of years and, what helped you finally just, you know, move on from that messaging and not take it on board?
Do you know, I think it was actually going back to grandma skills, like just those
Yeah.
basics of cooking and nourishment away from the noise and also waking up to the ultra processed food world and
Right.
really starting to recognize that there was a common enemy that a lot of people were ditching
Ah,
when they were
yeah.
starting said diet,
Yep.
and that was the processed crap, the sodas, the chips,
Yeah.
I used to look at, I remember I used to look at chocolates and things like really crappy compound kind of bars that
Yeah.
you get at a convenience store or supermarket and think, oh, I shouldn't, and I'm trying to cut down. That would be the mind
Yeah.
game there. But then when I actually learnt about profit and loss and shareholders and CEO
Mm,
golden parachutes when they stuffed up, but they still got $20 million on the way out, and the injustice of the ultra processed food matrix was actually one of the things that just made me go, oh, I just want to eat real food from farmers and learn how to cook it well. And it was just this simplification and moving away from, as you correctly put it, the noise. And I think we almost need to do that, moving away from all the protocolization of even real
yeah.
food now.
Yeah. There's no one protocol. And I like your framing of it as the common enemy. So you're
Mm,
right. Like a lot of the diets do, if just to cut through some of the confusion, there is a consensus, no matter who you ask, that, junk food or just even some of the ultra processed, what we used to think of like healthy food, but like
mm,
muesli bars and like some of the processed stuff. Most experts will agree that's, and frame it again, not, not bad, not sinful, not you're a bad person for eating it, but like that's actively harming a lot of people. And also just knowing, as we do now, that the food industry has been actively predatory in
yeah.
terms of formulating food that is
Mm,
like as addictive and tasty as possible and putting it everywhere in the packaging and just this incessant, and then coupling that with it was a big part of their strategy too, is to put it all on the individual. It's all about individual choice, and if you just
mm.
balance it with enough
Personal
exercise you're fine. And
responsibility. Yeah.
that's been predatory behavior. And so, as you know, in my book I do frame it as sheltering from those foods, and we do it
Mm,
from a position of sheltering from them, but obviously you have to, in the process of sheltering from those foods, you have to get what you need from all the other. You can't be hungry. I mean, I think what I've observed, one of the legacies of that diet culture that we've been talking about, is this shame and guilt. Shame not only about body size, but like what I've observed with my patients anyway, sometimes shame about feeling hungry. Like that the actual feeling,
Mm.
the actual like normal sensation, like physiological, undeniable drive to eat, feeling hungry, women
Yeah.
feel ashamed of it sometimes or embarrassed that they shouldn't have that. And so that's one of my
Such a good
messages
point.
too, is like,
Yeah.
if you're hungry, you're gonna eat because that's how the world works, because we're animals and that's how biology works. So there's no, absolutely no feeling ashamed of being hungry. There is maybe some troubleshooting around it. And if people are existing in a current physiological state where they're a lot hungrier than normal, I would say is very common, is one of the
Mm.
most common symptoms of metabolic dysfunction, rather than like apologizing for it or fighting it, or is actually try to make changes so that, again, coming back to that goal of satiety, so that you do, and it does happen, it can happen. I'm sure known this or talked to other people
Yeah.
about this. You can just watch your hunger sort of normalize, and just that's such a freedom in life to just be able to like
Mm.
eat a meal, be satisfied, and then just maybe not think about food again until you're ready for your next meal. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the goal. And I think once we recognize that that is what success actually looks like, then that's where the troubleshooting starts to look at why we might be still feeling hungry straight after
Yeah.
having eaten a full big plate of food. And
Yeah.
so, can we unpack that part of the book? Because I think in the first section where you're talking about testing, and quite often a doctor will just quickly whip up, like, maybe an HbA1c like once a
Yeah.
year or once every couple of years, or if you ask specifically. Certainly if you're under 40, most people would never even check it unless you were having
Yeah.
legitimate issues. But you say that that might not provide us a comprehensive picture of like insulin resistance, and how even testing the insulin might not be enough. And you actually flesh out a bunch of markers that can give us a
Yeah.
more comprehensive view. And I think we need to empower ourselves to know what these are, because a lot of our doctors, wherever we are in the world, aren't naturally doing these comprehensive panels.
So true. And HbA1c absolutely cannot rule out insulin resistance. So, I mean,
Mm.
it's good to have a normal HbA1c. You don't want to be in that sort of later stage problem of actually moving into chronically elevated blood sugar, but that comes very late in the game. Insulin resistance for decades could have normal sugar, normal HbA1c, and an increased tendency to low blood sugar. This is the part that so this is why interactions with my patients and followers is so important, because of course, as a clinician, I knew that one of the main symptoms of insulin resistance is to feel hungrier than normal, to experience increased frequency of episodes of hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. But because there's this sort of understanding that it's insulin resistance is pre-diabetes and therefore high blood sugar, I had a couple people comment on social media saying something like, well, I get low blood sugar, so therefore I must not have insulin resistance, when it's the actual opposite situation. Like that's probably likely in many cases a symptom of insulin resistance.
Mm.
So, and I know even just the term insulin resistance is quite daunting for people. I know that from decades of trying to communicate about it. People are like, that sounds hard. That
Oh
sounds
my God, am I
complicated.
getting diabetes? Yeah.
Yeah, but
Mm.
it's common, and I mean the estimates, even conservative estimates, say it's probably close to 1 in 2 adults have some degree of
Wow.
insulin resistance, and it's reversible. And it's just an important, I think, a really important starting place is to understand, yeah, to what degree that metabolic problem is happening. And yeah, as you say, there's like lots of different signs, like common ones are high triglycerides, high cholesterol. Fatty liver is a really common one. So I'm just connecting the dots for anyone out there who's been told they have fatty liver and don't really have a clear explanation as to why. It's probably insulin resistance, like
Mm.
90% chance that's what's causing it, although there can be other causes. And then, of course, the symptoms of abnormally high hunger, high blood pressure would be another one, more episodes of low blood sugar, and also like weight gain specifically around the middle. I always say it's like right under the rib cage. It's this kind of hard. layer or like almost like bulge under the rib cage, that's the kind of weight gain that is associated with insulin resistance, not the subcutaneous fat, not, as I say in the book, not the bum fat. That's something quite different. So hopefully that starts to, alert people who, um, yeah, might have this happening. Another important thing is family history
Mm.
family history of heart disease or family history of diabetes is a really good clue that this might be something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of midlife women get that. I mean, I remember like sitting on the couch and going, what the?
Yeah,
And that like just popping up for the first time, and thinking, where on earth has this come from? So what
yeah,
is the hormone interplay there that's happening for midlife women?
yeah. Well, it's basically that the way I frame it these days is that estrogen, higher dose estrogen, like we would get with regular natural menstrual cycles,
Mm,
gives us an edge. It gives us a bit of a superpower. It shelters younger women to some extent from insulin resistance. It is, of course, still possible to develop insulin resistance as a younger woman, for sure. I mean, that would be more so with polycystic ovary syndrome, for example.
mm,
That's another, sort of warning sign that people might be in this territory. But then, as we lose first progesterone, and then as we eventually kind of drop to the lower menopausal levels of estrogen, yeah, we do. It, we're more at risk of insulin resistance. And again, it doesn't mean that absolutely will develop insulin resistance because it always depends on lots of other factors.
mm.
But we tend to lose that protective effect.
Yeah. You use the word shelter a lot and
Yeah,
in this book, and I'm hearing it now. So
yeah,
I actually want to touch on that because for me it brings a feeling of safety and protection. And I know when we were talking about perimenopause, for example, in the last show,
yeah,
we really focused on the nervous system, and you actually have it play quite a starring role in
yeah,
addressing metabolic health.
yeah,
um, and so not really talking specifically about midlife women here. Broadly, how is the nervous system interplaying with metabolic health, and where do we find our best safety?
I know.
Because a feeling of safety is I'm
Mhm.
not hungry. I don't need to reach for something right now to survive. Or it
Yeah,
is feeling like I can sleep really well and my,
yeah,
blood sugar can just coast on through
yeah,
steadily in the night and not wake me up. Like
yeah.
safety is actually a big part of it, right?
It is. And the nervous system is a huge player. I think we're about to see in the research kind of an
Mm.
uptick in exploration of that. There was just a paper, I can even put it in the show notes if you want, that just came out this week about
Yes,
how
please.
profoundly the nervous system influences mitochondria, which are big players in metabolic health. It definitely influences like what's called set point, or sort of the part
Mm,
that in the brain, basically deciding when you've had enough to eat, when you need to eat more, how much energy you should burn unconsciously, which is constantly being sort of dialed up and down. And there's different parts of the nervous system, as people know. I mean, the boss of all of this is the hypothalamus, where we literally, that's where set point lives, like the part of the brain that is deciding how this should all go down. And then there's the autonomic nervous system. And as I say in the book a couple times, anything that affects the autonomic nervous system affects metabolic health. So that includes the two halves, sympathetic, adrenaline um, tends to sort of upregulate fat burning, but can also obviously increase stress. And then the parasympathetic part of the nervous system, which is the vagus nerve, is really important for ongoing satiety and digestion health, and yeah, all of that. So the great news about the fact that the nervous system is so influential is there's lots of nice ways to influence that. This goes back to the
mm,
basic principle of the way to metabolic health is through health, is to feel better, is to coax your nervous system, including your brain, that everything's okay, that that you are okay, that you're not in danger, that you have enough to eat, and not just enough calories, but like you have enough nutrition coming in so that
mm.
yeah, the body is is reassured like that. It doesn't go into panic fat storing mode, which is really our fat storing mode is an old survival strategy from, a couple 100,000 years ago when we, evolved to be very good at that.
Yeah. I often think my body is especially good at
Yeah.
survival.
Well, some people are
Oh.
better than others. It
So
is
can I
true.
ask about that? Because
Yeah.
it must be that we know this, right? That some people do tend to like save it for later, for want of a
Yeah.
better phrase, better than other people in
Yeah.
some old survival strategy.
Those would be, I mean, those are going to be genes you inherited from ancestors who lived
Mm,
through a famine, basically.
yeah.
And the less metabolically, you know,
Yeah, I got some Scottish, some
thrifty.
Irish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the other people that, weren't able to do that just died out basically. So, I mean, with some of those genes have come down to us. But there's more than that too. There's the genes that served us well over the previous millennia. And then there's some confusion that's happening in the past century, probably 50 to 70 years, probably, where a variety of things, including environmental toxins and including some very weird changes to our food supply, are confusing the system and potentially sending signals of famine when there's clearly no famine, but the brain thinks there might be. This is
Mm,
where some of the research is. So yeah, that old survival part of the brain that was all ready to pack on fat is thinking that it has to do that. Yeah, that's something
yeah.
about to go very wrong. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, a lot of people with environmental toxin illnesses of various kinds do go into that stress survival state. And I
yeah,
remember the dawning of like everybody has to try time restricted eating. And my very well meaning doctor at the time said, this could be really good for you coming out of mold and trying to lose the excess weight. And I remember like waiting for that, thing that I would eat at like 10 or 11 a.m. And I think within a month, I put on an additional 5 kilos because my body was clearly still under stress and still
yeah,
just battened down the hatches every time I ate something. It was
yeah,
good quality food. That's the thing.
yeah,
And I think this is where your book is so good, Lara, because it's so freaking nuanced. They're like no stone unturned. Everyone can
yep,
see themselves in any number of the scenarios and troubleshooting scenarios you paint. And that's what we need. We need to come
yeah.
back to individualism and not these blanket trends and protocols that everybody jumps on the bandwagon of, only to find out that only about 20% of the people thrive there.
And you can see it has a lot of it out there has an evangelical tone about it. Like, and you
Mm,
can get it, right? Like if someone has been struggling for years and then finds the way of eating that works for them and just unlocks, their
yeah.
metabolism and their, body shape changes. And then of course, they're going to be like a convert and wanting everyone else
Mm,
to do that exact same thing. But that is not how it works. Obviously, there are some basic principles, as we've acknowledged, that
yeah.
do work for most people. But in terms of like macronutrient or timing of meals or it just, I mean, I know it's cliche that there's no one size fits all, but that really is true. And the guiding principle again is that sense of safety and satiety. So, right, like you just described, that not eating till 10 a.m., which for some people feels amazing, by the way. Like some people
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that.
Oh, I have friends
Um,
that do it religiously and they're
yeah, but
thriving.
your body was like, oh no, 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 no,
Mm-mm.
no. Like,
No, no.
that didn't feel good.
I'm the 40 grams of protein breakfast gal who can then forget
Right.
about food till 1 p.m.
Okay, that works. That's your schedule.
Yeah.
And part of
And
it is we just have
took a
different
while to
circadian
get
rhythms.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, we have different circadian rhythms. And as you say, we've had different health histories. So depending on, yeah, like a certain medical health history or medications we might have been on, or they're going to be different timings. And it does mean there's going to be some trial and error. And I know that makes it harder. And I guess I would just say on that topic of trial and error, I guess I would say try to like logically come up with, for each individual what they thinks is feels like is probably going to be the right fit, maybe based on my
Mm,
book or based on talking to other people. And then, decide on that and give it a few months. Like, the problem with you don't want to do trial and error too quickly either. Try something for 2 days and then change and go back. And
mm,
so I think, but yeah, I think usually 2 to 3 months is enough time to give that something a go and see if that is increasing the sense of safety and satiety or if that's decreasing that
Yeah.
feeling.
And
Yeah.
so we talked about obviously that that common thing to shelter from for pretty much everybody, being junk or ultra processed food
Yeah.
or whatever you want to call that category.
Yeah.
Long life, I would probably even put in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And then obviously we're trying to create a sense of safety. Are there any other sort of this tends to work, this is what we know for sure kind of things that we can bring into our experimentation as we try to evoke this sense of deep safety, and you
Yeah.
don't need to go looking for food and your blood sugar's not going to
Yeah.
crash? What are some of the basic principles that we could follow?
Yeah. Well, that's in my book, getting what you need, being
Mm,
fully nourished. So you kind of just touched on it. I think, and again, this is where an area where most in the Venn diagram of all the different people out there, most people will agree getting protein earlier in the day and like when you need it is basically, I would say to my patients, a simple rule might be don't eat until you're hungry, but then eat protein, like in a good amount.
mm,
And as you said, 40 grams is a lot. I mean, that's, I probably don't quite hit 40, but just for everyone
yeah.
listening, if you're thinking about grams of protein, and probably most people know this, but some don't. So it's worth mentioning it again. We're not talking about 40 grams of a protein food. We're talking about like 40
The
grams of
protein being in,
actual
yeah, yeah,
protein. So
yeah.
how do you actually, just for illustration purposes, Alex, how do you hit 40 grams of protein? Like what would that look like for you?
For me, it'd be a full serving of a protein powder
Right?
and for me, whey protein works really well. I have
Yep.
friends that do better on pea proteins and like,
Sure.
everybody
Yeah.
find your thing. And then I would have a couple of eggs scrambled
Yeah.
some way on like a goat's cheese
Yeah.
toast. So there would be like 3 layers of a protein, and the toast would even be a really grainy, seedy kind of gluten-free something.
Potentially higher
So
protein. Yeah. So
yeah, yeah.
as this is the layering the protein, right? Because just for illustration, like one egg has between 6 to 8 grams of protein.
I'm hungry
So
by 9:30 if I do an
yeah.
egg on toast kind
So
of
even two
breakfast.
eggs is only 12 or
Definitely not enough for
15
me.
and you're talking
Yeah.
about 40. So yeah, I said the same, like you have to kind of layer it. Like I'm personally a big fan of just leftover dinner for breakfast. That's my breakfast, is like
Oh, yeah, same.
chicken
If there's
soup or
something
meat
really
or
easy
yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, that is my go-to and tends to often
Hmm.
be my lunch as well. I
Yeah.
I could just keep it simple. I think
Yeah.
there are just so many like recipe apps now, and like the glorification of cooking instead of the granification of I think granny is a much better thing to follow than
Gratification.
I just came up with it then, but it's just so easy and peaceful to just do basic, simple food and get on with your life. Like,
Yeah.
just it creates so much more space when you're not always thinking, "Oh, I need to put a new recipe in the plan this week, and I just think, yeah, it's been really
Well,
great for me to oversimplify almost. Like you say, just heat up leftovers, cook extra of basic things, eat it again the next day. Food doesn't
exactly.
have to be like the commercials suggest, this ongoing source of chasing
Mhm.
excitement. And I
No,
think this has spilled out into lunch boxes, meal prep, everything, and it doesn't need to.
no, it doesn't. And it can be quite hard unless you're a true foodie and get real
Mm.
joy from that. Like so as you know, I share in the book that I don't like cooking. I really don't like it actually.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I
And thank you for admitting that, because a lot
yeah,
of people think they have to produce incredible stellar meals every day, and you just don't.
no. And
Mm.
I don't like it. For a lot of years my husband did most of it, but just timing with this book somehow in the last maybe 6 months, I've had to take over the majority of cooking because he's gone back to university. He's super busy. And so friends have asked me, is it getting any easier? Like, nope. It's not. I still don't like it, but I am cooking almost every night and you just
Yeah.
have to do it. Like
Yeah, yeah.
there's really no option. And of course people can rely to some degree on I think the weekly delivery services, and we can
Mm,
touch on those. I think that obviously I want people to get what they need and be able to
mm,
live their life. Um and I'd say I don't know what your thoughts on those. I think you can use them, but I would just caution people, like you do need to probably just use your own sauces and your own oils, because it's a little detail, but I do think that commercial vegetable oils, like the cheap vegetable oils that are out there, the soybean and the corn oil. And
Mm.
I do think that's part of the problem. And I know that's one of
Well,
the
there would
many
definitely be biological genetic confusion trying to process those.
there
They're
is. And I
very
think,
processed.
and even the relatively like those well, as you controversially called seed oils. And I know I do
Mm,
acknowledge there's different experts saying different things about them, but my read of the research is the writings on the wall. I think
mm,
those, yeah, we can't avoid them though. I mean, of course you do eat them when you eat out in restaurants, but I think we can at least avoid them at home and try to have mostly olive oil, which is getting more expensive, but butter, coconut
mm.
oil. Yeah,
Well,
I
yeah,
think,
I always say, like, you can press an olive with a press, even with a lemon press at home, and you could get a few
yeah,
drops of oil out of it. So that's a very simple process.
yeah,
Whereas even a sunflower that has been cold pressed and all the things that you want to throw on a label to try and make yourself feel like you're buying something natural, it's still a lot harder to get it out of a little seed.
yeah. So
Mm,
there's that basic principle. It's just the fact that high dose omega-6, specifically linoleic acid, does seem to be doing weird things to
hmm
metabolic health, which is interesting because linoleic acid or omega-6, I mean, not to get too technical on people, but is also an essential fatty acid. So it can both be an essential fatty acid that we need in small amounts that you get from whole
mm.
food, and also potentially be a metabolic toxin might be strong, but like a metabolic obstacle in large dose.
Ooh,
So
obstacle's a good word. And I
yeah,
think just seeing the journey of, like, say, if one eats meat and cows and beef fat, grain feeding versus post grain feeding,
yep,
and the switcheroo of the
yeah,
two omega types, the major omega types in a
yep.
grass fed or grain fed, and then that is, like, for me, oh wow, and that was pretty much when we started to say meat might be bad for people sometimes in excess. So I don't think that's a mistake either.
There's another fatty acid that people could, if they're interested in this sort of thing, and we'll just
Mm.
say a bit more and then we'll move on to other topics. But there's something called C15. I
Ooh,
didn't really know
I
about
don't
this till I
know
started.
C15.
Yeah, so
Tell.
it's a type of saturated fatty acid, a 15 chain saturated fatty acid. Its nickname is C15, and it's so beneficial for metabolic health. It's found primarily in dairy, but also lamb and mostly animal products. And it's so beneficial for metabolic health that it's now available as a supplement. I mean, the scientists who have kind
Wow.
of discovered some of this are like, this is missing from our diet. We need to get it back. And yeah, that really does speak to, like, 60 or 70 years ago, we were eating a lot more of that and it's been actively removed. So it's maybe not even just it's the all the vegetable oil coming
Mm.
in potentially causing harm, but also usurping or crowding out some of the C15 that we need. So
Oh,
just another.
100%. Like, no one was
Mhm.
buying potato chips a century ago. So, like, and
Mhm.
now it's a really common thing in a lunchbox when you look around the
Mhm.
playground. So it's
Yeah.
not rocket science to see how the levels are changing and the ratios are changing in the everyday food mix.
Mhm.
Um, I want to talk about the some of the parts around that safety, 'cause just coming back to that, I think it's a
Yeah.
good theme, and sleep is obviously a huge
Yeah.
one for a set. Like, you have to have a sense of safety to be able to sleep deeply,
Yes.
and you have to be able to sleep deeply to have good metabolic health,
It's true.
and yet it eludes a lot of people. I think a lot of people are triggered when they hear, "You've gotta get that 8 hours sleep." It's like, "I
I know.
freaking know, don't you think I wanna get the 8 hours sleep?" So, approaching sleep troubleshooting, which you do beautifully in the book, but I would love for you to pick out a couple of things that even from today might be good to explore, whether it's supplements, whether it's winding down properly. What are your
Mhm.
top, let's try and get this sleep piece looking better?
Yeah, I'll give you a top two, I guess. And I'll just
Mm.
say, sleep is physical. A lot of it is physical. I think sort of having the ability for the nervous system to be healthy enough. It's not just, whatever tricks you do at bedtime to get
Mm,
there. It's like, what is the state of your nervous system throughout the whole day
yeah.
and then heading into the evening? So it's a whole body project. And I've shared in both my last two books, or maybe all three, I've shared that I have been an insomniac. I do not have a great track record with sleep. It's actually better now in menopause than it ever was. I think partly for me, it was about not trying to be too perfectionist about it. Like, I mean, I'm with you.
Mm.
Like this, some of the messaging around if you don't get 8 hours sleep, you're going to get diabetes and you're going to get cancer. And so
Yeah.
for people with insomnia, it's not only like lying there anxious, oh, I
It
can't sleep. Is now
perpetuates the
it's like,
the
oh, now I can't
yeah.
sleep and now I'm going to get diabetes because I can't sleep. Like it
I
doesn't help with
know. It's
that.
not helpful.
What people who have trouble sleeping need to hear is, you know what? It doesn't matter. Like your body will sleep when it's able, like ready to sleep. And
Mm.
all that said, I mean, there are obviously various strategies, and the two I think probably easiest ones would be magnesium, which of course I'm a huge fan of. It's just
Yeah.
like can be a game changer. Um, and then getting morning light. So
Mm.
not even just the evening dark. Sure, shelter from blue light in the evening, but get outside in the morning. For me personally, this has made a huge difference. And so I'll just like whatever, if you live in a high latitude in the winter, you might want to think about getting a sun lamp or something to get some light by preferably, 7 or 8 a.m. when your brain is you're trying to instruct your brain in
Mm.
the morning. And then the brain can like feed that into the circadian rhythm or the body clock and explain to every organ in the body. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, it's
yeah.
morning now. And then, in 12 hours, it's going to be evening. And so all the parts of the body are like, right, got it, understand. Yeah, we're going to be in 12
Mm.
hours, it's going to be evening. And that can make a huge difference. We are, as I say in the book, we're biological creatures. And a big part of being a biological creature is our circadian rhythm. So some scientists, all the different scientists looking at metabolic health and what has gone so wrong, everyone's got their theory about what's gone wrong. But the people studying circadian rhythm, they make pretty like solid statements like that what has gone wrong is the disruption of circadian rhythm. And that they could
Mm.
be right about that. It affects not only sleep, but metabolic health. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the broth in the soup, like a
Yeah.
really big,
Yeah.
important piece of
Yeah.
the overall puzzle. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think because when things are new, they feel like the biggest, most important thing ever
Yeah.
as well. And I get it. Like I really feel different when I take my walk in the park straight away in the
Yeah.
morning
Yeah.
and I do the right thing and put my glasses on if I want to watch TV at night and
Yeah.
relax. And we don't have any blue light on in the living or bedrooms, so I've got all of that going on. And I do feel like it makes a difference. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's inarguable, actually. So it's a
Yeah.
great one for people to try. And it is a place that you can bring a bit of biohacking in with tools.
Sure. And it's
Mm.
easy. And so, as you know, each in the book, as in the troubleshooting process, I list, I think it's about 25 potential metabolic obstacles.
Hmm.
Your body clock is out, is one of them. And it's for every obstacle, I give it, priority level and ease of fixing. And
Yeah.
circadian misalignment is high priority and easy to fix. It's that magic combination of you can always do that. People can always step outside or they can always get a sun lamp or they could all like it doesn't take a lot of some of the things are harder, like, learning to cook new foods is arguably quite hard or
Mm.
fixing a digestion problem or some of the other things I talk about, but trying to solidify or what they call entrain circadian rhythm and also work with your body clock. That kind of goes back to what you were talking about with how some people like waiting till 10 a.m. to eat, and some people really don't like that. And likewise, some people love a high intensity exercise in the morning, and some people really don't want that and need a much slower start to the morning. And that is valid. That's backed up by research. We know that different people have
Mm.
different chronotypes. And for someone who is more of a night owl chronotype, to force themselves to do intense exercise in the morning is probably counter yeah, like it's detrimental. It's probably not going to give the results that they need.
Yeah, I'm an
Counterproductive. That's the word.
evening
Yeah.
tennis
Evening
competition,
tennis is
not
your, yeah,
morning tennis competition. My gosh,
right.
no. Yeah, so and I think it's so important that this has come up, right? The permission to be yourself in all of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah. Because your
so
butt,
often trying to alienate ourselves from ourselves because we failed. And so we're
yeah,
trying to become someone we're not half the time.
we're kind of shoehorn our body
Mm,
into a protocol. So one thing to keep in mind. I mean, of course, there's lots of people out there giving advice and lots of different kinds of people and different kinds of advice. And so there's no generalization about that. But my observation is a lot like portion of the people giving advice are the early bird, like high intensity exercise types. And of course, they're
Yeah.
going to love that, that like super early, hit a
Yeah.
protein, get up and do a hit class at like 7 a.m. Like that's disaster for some people. And
Yeah.
so it is just acknowledging that, I guess what I'm saying is even people who are maybe drawn to sharing their fitness advice with the world might be a certain body type or a certain chronotype. And so whereas the night owls might be
Mm.
just writing novels and doing not sharing fitness advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a slow yoga person in the morning. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we should all be moving. Like, it's beautiful for lymph, it's
Yeah.
beautiful for blood
Yeah.
flow. There's a lot of benefits. A slow walk through the park with a friend, having
Yeah.
a chat, like easing
Yeah.
into your day. Or like, running like a bull out the door and getting your stuff done because you love it. Like, and
Yeah.
just be you and move the way that you feel called to move.
For sure. Yeah.
So good. And then continuous glucose monitors seem to be all the rage right now.
Right.
Every man and his dog is sharing their results and showing graphs and saying, "Oh, look at this," and then it's extrapolatable over everybody, of course, which it's not. How much importance should we give to some of the tracking tools out there? And I'll ask you about that one, but also about like movement, HRV, sleep apps as well. Like, what are your views on those? Because we can often feel like we need to get everything and do every test.
Well, as you
And
know, I do survey the different tracking methods in the book. So I
mm,
give them some real estate and, describe what they are and the kind of the benefits but at the front of that section, I do put sort of a disclaimer. I really do think there are, there's always two kinds of people in the world. I think there's people who track and people who don't track. And I am,
mm,
for better or for worse, I don't track. I don't like it. I like it doesn't suit my brain. Like for
mm,
me, I don't like it because always feels like a test that I could fail at. So maybe that's just me. Like that's just, I was just like, that doesn't sound fun at all. Especially like tracking my sleep. I'm like, oh my God, that would be the worst thing. Like then I'd be lying there thinking I'm getting bad marks on my sleep. So yeah, okay. All that said, yeah, I know that a lot of people do love tracking. And so I want them to get something out of my book as well. So if people are into it,
mm.
then sure, there can be some insights from the continuous glucose monitors. I mean, they're expensive. That's another reason people don't necessarily have to do them. But I think you want to, with any kind of data like that, especially that's kind of micromanaging type of like, you do want to just try to remember to take a zoomed out view of it and understand there are limitations to some of that data. And you want to be looking at trends rather than, I mean, it could be helpful, for example, to see are there certain foods that consistently seem to cause like a blood sugar crash 2 hours after eating them? Then, yeah,
Mm.
you might want to take that on board as information. I think of all the tracking, and I list them in descending order of utility, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
But well, number one, I'd say would be menstrual cycles. I do think tracking your natural menstrual cycle can be pretty helpful. I think tracking that feeling of safety, satiety, and zest is pretty helpful too. I do think there's something to be said for tracking macros. People have never done it, if nothing else, just get it. If even they don't have to track, but just get a sense maybe of protein. To circle back
Mm.
to the protein and what you were describing is what it takes to get 40 grams of protein. Because I can't even tell you how many conversations I've had with patients where I'll then do the same. I'll try to say, okay, well, you need like 2 eggs and some cheese and maybe like a piece of salmon, and like this is what 30 grams looks like. And they're like, I had no idea. Like people just have
Yeah.
no. So if you've never kind of had gotten a sense of how much protein you need and what it looks like, that can be worth maybe monitoring that. And just also even maybe just monitoring like on the days when you do hit 30 grams of protein in the morning, how do you feel after that? Again, collecting multiple days of data. So there's not much you can do with one data point. Like not much you can do
Mm.
with, well, I did this and then my weight was this. It's like you can't and tracking weight itself is can be demoralizing. I'll just say for what it's worth, fluid weight fluctuates a lot
Yeah.
with fluid. And so if you're trying to go by the number on the scale, that can be pretty demoralizing and it can mask the benefits that might have happened because you can have a lot of changes happening under the hood and improvements to metabolic health and satiety and insulin going down. And yet your body size kind of seems the same at first. Like you don't want to be discouraged
Mm.
by that. Yeah.
Yeah, such a great point. And again, would it be maybe about getting to know yourself and what your triggers are, like you with the sleep app?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
love my Oura ring and I
Yeah,
love
fair
nerding
enough.
out on that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I find it really positive for my brain. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, like if you, when those nights that you go to bed and you read, you do much, much better. So just remember that. Like, it's like having a really positive little coach. Whereas I completely see that if you had a history of insomnia,
Yeah.
it could be a self-perpetuating beast of I suck, I fail, I'm doing worse
Yeah.
and worse, and then you're more stressed and less likely to sleep. So it
Yeah.
really is know thyself.
Well, this is good. So we've in our sample size of two, the two of us here, we've got one tracker and one non-tracker. So
Yeah.
people can pick and choose. And yeah, and I do want to be supportive for people who love tracking. It's like
Mm,
if you love it, fine. Like, I think if it's empowering and as you say, you're thinking, oh, that's good. That just, reinforces the good things that I might be
mm,
doing, then yeah, you know,
yeah,
do it.
nice.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, supplementation. Obviously, the nutraceutical industry has blossomed over the last couple
Yeah.
of decades, and then it feels like a new company is started off the back of every research paper that comes out. You mentioned the
Like the
C15, and I
C15.
didn't want to
It's
say
true.
something
No,
like
I know
that
it's
might be
true.
bad because it could actually be very good. But at the same time, it's like, oh, we have new research that supports that we can bring out
I
this
know.
new strain of probiotic and
True.
do a huge marketing campaign around this one study. But a lot of people don't know that often it is just quite nascent research,
It's true.
and we can end up taking a ton of things, spending a lot of cash.
It's true.
How do we actually get to a place where we have a qualitative approach to supplementation? How do we know when we really need it?
I know. It's the
I
million
mean,
dollar
it's a
question.
big
Well,
question,
it is. I
but
mean, and just to say, for people just to know, like there's no, for a lot of these important nutrients, there's no test. So
mm,
there's just no test. So as you would have seen in the book, I kind of put my full weight behind five, that
yeah,
I think are the most important. And even then, not everyone needs them because you can get them from a diet, but it has to be a particular kind of diet. And I'll just say that the diet that would fully provide probably these five that I'm about to list would be a whole food diet from 100 years ago where they also ate organ meats. So I
mm,
do think the missing organ meats is part of the problem. I do
yeah,
think so. That
okay,
would be again my read of the science. And so for any of those keeners out there who are, eating liver and kidney and as part of a whole food diet, you may not need supplements. I guess so. I certainly don't think there's a one size fits all for supplements either. But the five, and I'll just list them because I don't want to be coy. I don't want people to feel like they need to buy the book to
yeah,
learn what
yeah.
my five are. I'll just say, um, so make, and they're all, yeah, I like them too because they're inexpensive and any brand is fine. Like you really don't have to, like, there's no particular, they're easy to find. So
Mm,
magnesium, which is no surprise. My other books are big fans. Taurine, which kind of go together. I think the magnesium and taurine, a lot of the research looks at them together. They both really support mitochondrial health, amongst other benefits. Um, Choline, which might not be on people's radar, but it's huge. It's really important. It helps to reverse or prevent fatty liver. Helps the body to
good.
metabolize
There's in
fat. It
eggs,
promotes
right?
satiety. Yeah, it's in
And are you
eggs.
talking like because with supplements, you'd often see choline as phosphatidylcholine.
Right.
Is
So
that what we're going
lecithin,
for?
so lecithin or phosphatidylcholine is
Mm,
a source of choline for sure. There's other what are called activated choline. So I personally take it's called alpha GPC, which is a activated version of choline. But people don't, I mean, they could look at that or they could just go back to old fashioned lecithin or they could just eat eggs and liver and seafood
mhm,
and get choline that way. And then the other two are inositol, which anyone who's been looking at PCOS or polycystic ovary syndrome might have inositol on their radar. It historically was also obtained from organ meats. It's been clinically as a supplement. It's been clinically trialed for PCOS and for the insulin resistance of perimenopause, menopause. And then the
mhm,
final one is glycine. And I think what
mm,
glycine is a calming neurotransmitter. Again, it shelters the liver to some degree from fructose and metabolic dysfunction. It helps with sleep. I always feel like I'm doing an infomercial for some of these supplements. It's like, and it can also do this. Um, but one thing to tie it in, so glycine is the main ingredient in collagen. So
Hmm.
you know how popular collagen is.
Mm.
I mean, I'm not anti-collagen. I think it's fine if you want to take that, but you could also just take glycine, I think, for a lot of those same benefits.
And so I took glycine and then I had to stop taking it. I'm
Oh,
just going to
say
share it
why?
just
Yes,
because
sure. Totally.
I was like, oh my gosh, no, it really is the glycine. It made me so sleepy the next day.
Right. It's very
So
sedating.
sleepy. It's so sedating. And yeah, I slept better,
Right.
but it just kept on keeping on. And
That's interesting.
so interesting. And I wondered
Hmm.
whether it was because I had a really omnivorous kind of diet, that maybe I'm just getting enough in my
Maybe.
meals and
Yeah,
I didn't need more.
sure.
Or it could actually just be I do tend to process any medication or supplement about half the speed of
Yeah.
anyone else. So I just wondered whether it was lingering for longer.
I don't know
And
what the
I'm
half-life
absolutely
of.
not poo-pooing it because
No,
it's like
no, it's good to
such a
share yours.
great
Yeah,
nutrient. But like it kind of comes back to that, what about me? Like, am
I
I the
know.
weird one who does
No,
something and like it's supposed to work for everybody and then it doesn't, right?
that's a it's a
So
really good example of
I
that. Yeah,
had to share, yeah,
it's
because I know
good.
you appreciate that kind of
Oh
nuance.
yeah.
So,
Totally. And I think for every one of those five I've mentioned, I've certainly through the years had the occasion, patient or follower say, "Oh, but I tried that, but that didn't work for this reason." So yes, I mean that's it's good to share that kind of information,
mm,
and also the great thing about those five potentially is they can be tried one at a time. Like they don't have to come all in
yes.
one thing.
Mm,
So you can just pick and choose. And um, a simple one if people are just really don't want to go through all the trouble like trying all of those. I would say probably a magnesium glycinate that does contain some glycine. Magnesium glycinate supplement is a really good place to start. It can just help stabilize blood sugar, make people feel, you know,
safe,
potentially, yeah,
happy,
safe.
chill.
It's the safety
Mm,
mineral. Feel a bit more relaxed, maybe sleep better. Yeah, yeah,
mm. And so sleep really shaping then like a story of satiety almost the
yeah,
next day if
yeah.
we are able to make improvements there. So it's a great place to focus.
It is.
And
Yeah,
then in terms of I guess, different stages of life because
right.
metabolic health changes, right? You've mentioned
It
PCOS
does.
briefly. We
Yeah,
briefly talked about midlife. And you also talk about puberty in the
I
book.
know.
So a lot of us have, who would be listening to the show now, would have, teens and kids starting to
Hmm.
hit puberty, girls. What's happening with metabolic health at that point? Because that does seem to be a time when things can go a bit haywire as well.
Yeah. So just to differentiate, as you say, like I center. So female, I would say female is the norm. I'm just mostly joking,
Mm.
but like female is the normal version of human physiology, and male is the quirky variant. it's. I mean, it's both. Obviously, we're both normal,
Mm.
but female health, metabolic health does have these different modes, right? Yeah, like
Mm.
there's, as I say, there's puberty, there's menstruation, then the two phases of the menstrual cycle, then there's pregnancy if people opt and are able to have a pregnancy, then there's postpartum, and there's breastfeeding, and then there's perimenopause, and there's menopause. Like it's a lot. It's a lot of heterogeneity that men don't really have. So female puberty is interesting in that I think even more so than male puberty, but definitely for female puberty, there is this phase of what's called physiological insulin resistance. So there are the two times when quite a strong shift to insulin resistance is normal or physiological. So one is female puberty and one is pregnancy. Um, so girls, yeah, pre-period. So like, in those few years leading up to their first menarche or their first period, they do they do become more insulin resistant. And that will be associated with that kind of thickening around the waist. Like a lot of 10, 9, 10, they do get this sort of um it's like change in their body shape. That is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's just their body. That's a stage of puberty as they the idea is,
Mm.
you go insulin's a growth hormone. So they go through this phase of insulin resistance. And then once periods kick in, then both estrogen and progesterone have especially estrogen has an insulin sensitizing effect. So it's going to change body shape again and improve insulin sensitivity sort of just naturally from that process of moving into periods. So I think for girls, it's just about being aware that there's just sort of some normal metabolic changes happening. They still need healthy food throughout. And I think arguably maybe they are at a bit more risk of going more down the path of proper insulin resistance and PCOS during that transition time.
Mm.
Like we talked about in our perimenopause interview.
Yeah.
Like, so perimenopause is second puberty, a time of transition, a time of sort of vulnerability. I think first puberty is like that too. So it's a transition time. Um, yeah, to get girls through that, they just need to be fully nourished with all the things, the nutrients we've been talking about, protein, moving their body, getting enough sleep, that their healthy circadian rhythm, all of that's going to help them, um, move through that
Mm.
calibration of their hormonal system.
Yeah, and for that, I would definitely point people to a show I just did with Jocelyn Brewer on screens and
Yep.
healthy technology conversations. So we are getting away from those screens and getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
And my pediatrician with my son the other day,
Yeah.
Layla Masson, she said, so, you know, does someone have to wake you up before school?
Right.
And we were like, yeah, we got to peel him out of bed at like just after 7. And then he said, she said, what about the weekends? And he said, no, I really like to get up early because, I get to play video games or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we have historically let him do that before we've gotten the day going. And
Right.
she said, okay, so what we're going to do from now on is no screens until 8 a.m. on the weekends,
Oh,
because
yeah.
she was finding that kids were excited because it was a day off. And
They could
so
do
their
their,
brains are already like, I got to get up early. And so they're losing their sleep. And then, of course,
oh,
that's not great for metabolic health. I'm sure girls are
no.
doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They're probably on Snap talking with their
Yeah.
girlfriends or watching TikToks, tends to, I mean, that's a broad generalization of what the
Mm,
different sexes are doing at different ages. But I got enough mum friends to know that that's pretty much what's
mm,
going on.
mhm.
And I think that's a really important one playing into this metabolic health setup in
Yeah.
puberty.
Yeah. No, it
Mm,
is. Yeah. To yeah, make it easier for them to get the sleep they
yeah,
need. Understanding
100%.
too that teenagers, we just on circadian rhythm, we do have this. So all of us are we're all calibrated slightly more early bird or night owl, just genetically. That's
Mm,
kind of how we are. But then everyone becomes more night owls as teenagers and then swings back to kind of more early bird by midlife. So it is, kids do. I mean, there's been lots of people have talked about that, but the kids generally do kind of shift to this one to go to bed later, sleep in later. And
mm,
I
normal.
guess it's a balance between, honoring that and letting them do that to the degree that's possible, and also not letting them like drift too far into, sleeping later and later, and the circadian rhythm can just start to drift. That's like a type of jet lag almost that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
definitely is not good for metabolic
No,
health.
no.
And the last topic, because
Okay.
this actually you addressed quite early in the book in your troubleshooting phase, but I wanted to put it last because I think a lot of people are confused about hydration as well.
Right.
We're now hearing we have to be drinking structured water or hydrogen water, or
Right.
we've got to start the day with electrolytes, otherwise you're going to be half asleep, or you got to put salt in every glass of water, or you've got to get 8 glasses of water, you've got to get 3 liters of water, you've got to have alkalized water. It's like, oh my gosh, like, can we simplify the hydration conversation by starting? Second last question is why is hydration so critical to metabolic health? And then from there, what do we know for sure?
Right. Well, I mean, there might be people out there who know more than me about the types of water, and I haven't
Mm,
honestly looked at that detail. But hydration is important just because that's how our body chemistry works. It needs to
yeah.
be, and also, I guess, more pragmatically, is the fact that it's an unlucky coincidence that our thirst signals can easily get wires crossed with our hunger signals. So it is
Mm,
very possible to um, yeah, think we're hungry when we're really just thirsty. And then the other thing is dehydration is one of the stresses that can confuse the set point or the regulatory mechanism in the brain into thinking we're in like a prepare for famine danger state, and therefore
Mm.
we need to gain fat. So you don't want dehydration to be telling your brain that. So I mean, telling, yeah, so it's just a
Have a
simple
glass
way
of
to
water. Don't
just
just
have some.
look at the donut across the road and put it on your
Yeah,
hips. Like that's, yeah,
yeah.
that's a good.
um I don't know. I don't, in terms of all the other stuff about the water. What's interesting, I mean, I feel good on with salt and water. I just shared
Mm,
that in the morning. I don't put salt in every glass or anything, but that's more my, I always thought that was kind of like my nervy, like the particular way, like high sympathetic tone kind of nervous system I have. I don't know that everybody needs that. I guess I just really would be very surprised if there's like a one size fits all for electrolytes or types of water. Do you have other thoughts on that, Alex? I mean,
well, look, I think with the way tap water is presented to us, as the thing coming out of the tap, it could use some help
oh yeah,
to
let's get
be
the chlorine out. Yeah,
optimized.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I
yeah,
think get the
yeah.
okay, yeah. So I think get the
Mm,
chlorine out at
mm,
bare minimum, just because it doesn't taste very nice. And also
yeah.
chlorine is bad for the stomach and different things. And yeah, so I think filtering water, I certainly do that.
Mm,
And then, electrolytes if they feel good, maybe especially in the morning if they feel good. And beyond that, yeah, I don't know. I just keeping in mind, herbal teas is still water. Sparkling water
mm.
is still water. It doesn't have to always be pure water.
Yeah, we can make it exciting if we find it
Hmm.
difficult, or you
Hmm.
could be that person that starts having it by your desk.
Yeah,
But yeah, I do know that I find as a really active person, I do well to have electrolytes in the
yeah,
mornings,
yeah,
especially being more sporty in the evenings.
yeah,
And I find that that really hydrates me. And that if I would just drink my regular water filter water, maybe I might get a bit puffy. It's like it's almost like not really getting to where it needs to go
yeah,
because I don't have enough salts, like you said. And I have a sympathetic tendency as
yeah,
well. So it could
yeah.
actually, I'd never heard that, but that could be something to just tune into and be curious about.
Yeah, and also we need more salt in the premenstrual phase of the menstrual cycle because progesterone makes us pee out sodium. So lots of things make us lose sodium, right?
Ooh,
So
that's a
the
good
state of the
hack.
state of your nervous system, and they always used to say to like avoid salt during the premenstrual phase. It's actually the opposite. It's probably when you need more.
Oh my
So I think
gosh.
I think
Yeah.
salt and electrolytes is something people that they really can just kind of test that out. And within a few days, I know I said earlier you should wait, give something any kind of intervention or change a few months. I think trying electrolytes, you should know within a few days if that's going to be, if that
Yeah,
feels
it's a
good in
pretty
terms of,
immediate
yeah,
cellular
yeah,
shift, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lovely. Okay, my gosh, we have definitely covered a lot of things. Lara, amazing to chat to you. It really is such a great offering, this book, for anyone who actually just wants to know more, but be less confused in their knowing more. Because often when you know more, it can make you more confused. But I genuinely believe, having read your book, that
Yeah.
it's a calming experience. You're like, oh, I didn't realize
Oh,
that, or oh, I had never really thought about it that way. And it really is
nice.
not lots of information to scare you more. It's lots of information to help you feel like you deeply understand your body better. And that's not easy to achieve as an author. So I want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you. And trust your body. That's one of my other messages too. Like your
Mm.
body knows. I love that you said my book's a calming experience. That's really nice feedback. Thank you.
It is. Well, quite often, lots of information can feel lots of terrifying. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I need to consider all these things. But
Right.
actually, with the way you frame the beginning of the book, it's almost like a let's get curious and see what's going on for you, and you get to
Yeah.
find out for yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas metabolic health approaches can often feel like a blanket situation, and then you get
Yeah.
your diet plan and your protocol, and then 2 weeks in, you're wondering why it didn't work for you, and then you failed another
Yeah.
thing. And I
I
think
know.
it's time to end that. So I
Yeah.
appreciate your very wonderful effort to do so.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks for the chat. It's been a great conversation
Yeah, it
today.
really has. Thanks, Lara. I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment-free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or Euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the Explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.